Okay, guys, I'm here today with Brian Glick. Huge honor for me. Guys, Brian is the longest student from John Danaher. He went from white to black belt with John, and I think you're probably one of the first students of John, and the one who went into the black belt. And guys, he's a legendary coach. I have heard a lot of people talking about him, and today he's finally here teaching with us here at BJJ Fanatics. And he's shooting an entire structure all about under pressure, focus on the clamp guard. So Brian, you're developing this series all about dealing with pressure, right?
Yes.
And I think you're a great example because you're skinny.
Yeah.
And I heard that John almost made you give up a bunch of times in Jiu-Jitsu because you had to deal with a lot of pressure in the beginning. Can you explain the whole story?
Sure. Yeah. It's true. You know, when I first started Jiu-Jitsu, this was back in 2000, and you remember it was kind of a different thing than it is now, and the Marcelo Garcia Academy was kind of a rough and tumble place, and I was the basement. It was not even the basement at this point. It was this was when it was above a methadone clinic.
I heard about that.
Yeah, this is like even more legendary than that for the period, and it was just populated by a lot of tough, strong guys, people who were lifetime martial artists, people who had done other martial arts, MMA guys, just like, and I was coming at the time, John was teaching during the daytime. And so I was usually working at night. So I was coming during the day, and the people who were coming during the day were in many ways tougher customers than the people who were coming at night, because if you were coming during the day, it meant that you were working at night, and people who were working at night were like cops and bouncers, and then you know the other side of it, you know, criminals and ne'er-do-wells. So it was pretty rough. And so after, you know, I came in, and I'd been trying jiu-jitsu, you know, for a couple weeks, and one day John, you know, approached me, and he was like, you know, you seem like you're a very nice guy, but Brian, I have to tell you something. I don't know if this is really for you. And I was, you know, at the time I was thinking, well, you know, like I'm having a pretty hard time, but I kind of think I could do it. And he was like, I don't really think so. He said, I think you would do better if you found something that was like a little more your speed.
Play guitar.
Yeah. Paint, you know, roller skating, you know, do something else. And you know, I was kind of like, oh, maybe I'm not doing as well as I thought. And I kind of, you know, I said, okay. And I thought to myself, oh, you know, like I'll give it a couple more weeks and keep trying. And I ended up not leaving. And this is interesting because, and I've told this to John before, but this was like one of the very few times in all of the years that I didn't listen to him and didn't take his advice. And so I was lucky that it turned out I was right. Not right often, but like this was a time where it turned out like this was definitely the right choice. And it actually happened again. Like again, I thought I was making progress and I was doing well, and he came back to me and he was like, I don't think this is the right thing for you. And I was like, wow.
I hadn't give up in the first time.
He was really trying. You know, he wanted to make sure, but you know, I do think that that was one of those things for me where I was like, once I was able to kind of get past those initial barriers, and I think for him as a teacher, and you've had students and I've had students where it's like they seem like they're people who just are not going to be suited for jiu-jitsu. Like they're not really going to be able to pull it off, and you're afraid they're going to get injured or they're going to hurt themselves and not even hurt somebody else, you know. But you know, being on the other side, a lot of times when you see someone actually kind of sticking with it, you're like, oh, this guy's kind of scrappy, and maybe I was wrong. And so I'm happy to say that I think that this was one of those cases where I was able to prove to him that actually I was supposed to be doing jiu-jitsu. And you know, the other thing about that for me is that because that was the way it went, I feel like the reason that I came to jiu-jitsu, and maybe a lot of people feel like this, but it was because like there was jiu-jitsu had a promise to it that was unlike a lot of other martial arts. You know, like when you watch like kickboxing, Muay Thai, or karate, it's like, it's very hard. Even judo, very hard. But jiu-jitsu was always like it promised that the smaller person could find a way through somehow. And
it is true. Yeah.
It is true. It is true. And I remember, Renzo at the time was, when he was, this is again 2000, he was a small guy. Yep. He was like a lighter weight guy. And I thought to myself, like this is what those guys are talking about. You can be a smaller person and you can survive against a bigger person, and you can, it's all technique, and we know, of course, that strength helps and size helps. But at that time, I really believed in jiu-jitsu, like the promise of jiu-jitsu as being for the smaller person, that big people, it's nice, but they don't really need jiu-jitsu as much. And so I think that like that was a belief that I had early on, and I didn't know if it was true or not, but I kind of wanted it to be true. And so I think that kind of pushed me through this period. But it wasn't easy, of course, as you know. And so I was really kind of happy to prove John wrong in that one instance, but also to kind of realize, you know what? Jiu-jitsu does actually work. It does do the thing that the Gracies have always said it does, that people have always said it does. And that's kind of been the way that I've approached training ever since that time.
I think the only little part that this becomes not true is if both people are exactly the same level in jiu-jitsu.
That's right.
And then, of course, that if one is way stronger and way heavier than the other, but if you know jiu-jitsu and the other person doesn't, it doesn't matter how big that person is, you're always going to win, at least.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us as students have had those moments where like it's like an aha moment where you're like, this is incredible. Like you end up doing something that you didn't think you could do.
Yeah.
And when you realize that you're doing it with the help of someone's teaching or someone's mentorship or a technique that your teacher taught you, it really, you really feel it deeply and it sticks with you for a long time.
I fully agree.
Yeah. Do you have any moments like that? Like, what was your like?
When I started jiu-jitsu, was because a friend of mine, who was one of the best friends of my brother, who was older than me, 3 years. They were going to my house, and I was 14 years old. They were like 16, 17. They were going to my house, play video game, and in the end, they would like roll in the carpet. And this small guy, who was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, was not even a black belt, used to beat up everybody. And I was like, that was an aha moment for me. I was like, whoa, how he's doing that? Like, and then he told him that he was doing jiu-jitsu and that, but exactly what you were talking here. Like, he was the smallest one. The others were much bigger, much stronger, but they didn't know jiu-jitsu. He knew jiu-jitsu. And he didn't need to be a black belt.
Right.
Just as a blue belt was enough to. So that's exactly the same thing. Oh, Brian. But anyways, so this first instruction that you're doing, it's from the series called Under Pressure, which is about dealing with pressure and that. And I love how you were doing this in a way that's all about saving and memorizing. Retention, recover, and attack. From the clamp guard, which is the first instruction of the series, right?
Yes.
So can you explain a little more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So, over the years, and more, John's been talking about this more recently, but over the years, he's always emphasized this idea of optimizing your position in jiu-jitsu. And from the very beginning, his definition of jiu-jitsu, you probably know, and people who are watching have probably seen him say that it's a science of control that leads to submission. So it was a very particular approach to jiu-jitsu that, for me, it was, I didn't have another sort of, I didn't have exposure to jiu-jitsu in another way. So this was like the only thing I ever knew. But it was really geared towards optimizing wherever you were so that you could get to a submission. And so retention, guard retention, and then recovering back to guard from a bad position, like the bottom of side control or bottom of the mount. It was never just about getting back to a neutral position, because for me as a small person, especially with bigger people, that wasn't really good enough, because it was really never neutral. You know what I mean? So the fact that we were learning, he was teaching retention, he was teaching guard recovery and getting to better positions, but it was always with the idea that you're getting to a place where you can level the playing field with the person and then start to go into attacks. So one of the very first systems that he ever taught me was this clamp. And the idea was, this was like a little bit before he began working on this, I think, at the same time he was developing leg locks, but it was a little bit before the whole system of leg locks came together. This was where we were using our lower body to attack our partner's upper body, but not just move to move. You know, not just, okay, this is the triangle, this is the arm lock, this is Kimura. It was a way where things really connected. And for me, and the way, I think naturally the way I think, but also the way jiu-jitsu moves, is like you benefit from having pieces connected to one another all the time. It builds off of your partner's reaction. So the clamp is a sort of a guard, and it's a system that was one of the first things he taught me. And it was one of the first times where I started to feel like, in spite of there being a lot of pressure on me, and this is like, because at the beginning, people would pass my guard, I didn't know what I was doing, and they would get to cross-side positions, and they would just cross-face me, or even bottom of half guard, if I was like lucky enough to be in the bottom, still same thing, pinning from the top with the half guard. This clamp guard was like one of the first things I learned where I was like, you know what? I understand what I'm supposed to do, and I can really meaningfully move from one thing to the other. And so it was really important at the time, but over the years, what I found, and we talk a little bit about this in the instructional, but over time, what I found is that by seeing that over and over again, it hasn't gotten more boring, it's gotten more interesting.
Got it.
And I find that I still, to this day, I'm using the clamp regularly. I'm using it when I play close guard. I'm using it when I play bottom of half guard. And I try to, even when it's not effective, I'm trying to use it, and it's a go-to strategy for people like when I'm training with Gordon, or I'm training with Giancarlo, or I'm training with Gary. You know, these guys are, you know, objectively bigger, stronger, more athletic than I am. And this is still one of the things that I go to all the time. So I'm very excited to be able to share it with people.
Can you show some overview so they get what it...
100%, yeah, 100%. So a good example of the clamp is a situation where I'm in the bottom of the half guard position. So this is, of course, a position where you thrive bottom of half guard. But one of the first elements of the clamp is understanding that when we're on the bottom here, we make sure that we're monitoring our partner's arms so that they can't control our head, right? We set a frame in place. And then instead of looking to either sweep deep, because for me, when I'm on the bottom here, I feel like if I'm starting to dive through here, even if I know what I'm doing, I'm still underneath you. Yep. And now I run the risk of either, exactly getting my neck into, I get kind of entangled here. And even if I do get through to a position like this, there's nothing that says that I'm going to be able to sweep you. So I never really liked going deep underneath.
Okay.
Instead, what I preferred to do, and what the clamp was designed to do, was to allow someone to have this good underhook, to allow someone to have their arm in place, but then to be able to fold our legs here into a position where we're using our legs on our partner's upper body. Okay. And now from here, once we're in this position, we can control a couple of things. Number one, it's easier for me to control your posture from here. So as you go to posture up, I'm well connected. And if you do manage to come up, you can posture here, like plant your hand. Yeah, you bring me with you. And now from here, we have a number of good entries, right? So that's one. Two is, this is a place where it's difficult for you to join your hands and use them together.
Yeah, they're so away from each other.
Yeah, and so now from here, we have the option of attacking elongated arms on this side and maintaining distance here so that it's more difficult for you to smash me and get chest to chest. Out of a position like the clamp, we have attacks, a lot of attacks, upper body attacks, including triangles. Omoplatas, opportunities for utagatamis, and then even opportunities to invert to alternative variations.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome.
On the arm. So what I found was that being able to use my legs against a partner's upper body provides a very strong and robust method that doesn't require going deep underneath. It takes away a lot of the pressure that people feel when they are facing someone who's much bigger. and you can mess stuff up a little bit. Like, in other words, if you advance forward and you get an underhook on me here, if I don't have a tool to be able to manage this position and understand what I'm supposed to be doing, a lot of times I get smashed from here. But I can often allow you to take this position and then even from here, find a way to reclaim inside position, control with wedges, and now start to look to take advantage of these separated arms. So whether we're looking to work from a closed guard or half guard, or in many cases, as was true for me, from the bottom of a cross side position here, where all we're really able to get is an elbow to the inside. The way that the recoveries are usually taught is we're getting back to a neutral position.
Yep.
But as John has reiterated over and over again, why get back to a neutral position when you can get back to an optimal position? So once we're here, a lot of times we're finding that it's very easy to enter back into this position.
It comes so smooth that
it goes really quickly and very smoothly. And you know, a lot of times in situations like this, when the tighter the guy is to you here, once you separate, the worse it is because your underhook becomes kind of a liability instead of an asset. So this kind of idea, like even the techniques that we go through in like a couple of different positions. And then we look at a core set of submissions instead of like a million different submissions, which I think sometimes people feel overwhelmed when there's too much. A core set of submissions that are familiar, but with key details that John has shown over the years to me and that I've tried to use. What we find is that we have like a very concise system for managing exactly this distance where somebody is driving forward. And now, plus more and more, we're seeing in among people who are training, especially younger people, that this sort of pressure passing from the top, underhook, cross face is like happening all the time. So dealing with that is very important.
No, it's super interesting because now that I understand even better what exactly is the clamp, you can do that from butterfly, you can do that from half guard, you can do that from side control on bottom, you can do that from guard. I mean, like, even if the person hasn't passed your guard yet, but is on your side, you can get there. Maybe even from the mount you can find.
We cover this.
They have the underhook.
You can work from the mount. You know, one of the things about inside position is that sometimes if you the best thing is to have inside position on your partner's legs and on your partner's upper body. But if that's great, but even elite people can't always maintain both. So if you lose one, it makes sense to try to keep the other. And this is kind of an example of that, where we're trying to look to recover inside position, and you can lose a little bit and still come back and recover. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying, why it was so important for me was I felt like I was losing a lot. But
you're going from bad to great in a very short,
and that's
in one move.
Yes, exactly. And
that's awesome.
And yes, exactly, to your point, like we cover a few different situations for retention, including using the clamp from a body lock, using a clamp from a knee cut when the guy explodes past your guard. Again, these are all things like the clamp is such an interesting thing because it's really kept pace with innovations and trends in jiu-jitsu. I think a lot of times when someone, and you maybe have experiences yourself with this, but like there's some things that you learn when you're like a blue belt that are no longer relevant. You know, like whatever. People are not passing that way or whatever. This is something that's worked for such a long time, and I think that...
And you still use it.
And exactly, 100%.
No, and the other thing I was thinking here while you were teaching is like, now I'm connecting the dots here. Now it makes a lot of sense. So, under pressure, and the very first video you're doing is about the clamp, because I think like anytime I want to make pressure, I kind of need one underhook.
Right.
So, this is the perfect scenario to deal with pressure because you give the person the underhook, they think they will be able to put as much pressure as they can, and then all of a sudden they're inside the clamp. And
it's very demoralizing too, you know. And I think that was something else. Like people became over the years, people were like a little more reluctant to attack as aggressively once they realized that the things that they thought they needed to be successful were actually kind of turning against them. And so, and I think, you know, again, John has covered this in depth in in other instructionals, but the idea that you can kind of put your partner, like make your partner a little wary of attacking you and coming forward with pressure. Now all of a sudden you've got some more room. The one other thing I was going to say about this position is that it's also what I found was that over the years it was very developmentally important. So it taught a number of really important like concepts and principles, like the idea of inside position, the idea of wedges. A lot of these things are embodied in the clamp. And when John really started teaching ashigarami, what I discovered, and he talks about this as well, was that the exact same positioning that you use for the clamp on the upper body is what you use to attack the legs on the lower body.
That's interesting.
So it means that if, for someone who is already comfortable attacking the legs, the clamp is very natural.
Okay.
For us, for me, I had learned the clamp first, and then when he was showing ashigarami, I was like, oh, this is just the same thing on the leg. So I could just show you quickly if you'd like to see. But if you look at the positioning here, we have a leg on the inside and a leg behind, and the focus is on one knee in, one knee back, and then we have our heels joining here.
Yep.
So this exact configuration, if you post your leg here, you'll see that it's exactly the same thing.
Man, that's awesome.
The only difference is that, like, here it's your leg that's in between.
And here's my arm.
Exactly. And
Man,
so,
that's awesome.
So we have a lot of the same things that we do.
How does he?
I don't know, man.
John
I don't
think
know.
about
I don't
this
know.
stuff?
I don't know. It's amazing.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
yeah.
amazing.
So like that's again like you know, and I say this also in the video. It's not like I'm inventing all of these things.
I get it.
You know, if it wasn't for John, of course, I wouldn't be sitting here with you. But you know, my life would be completely different. Also,
no, that's awesome.
You know, just as an instructor and a
that's
mentor
amazing that
and a
you
friend.
recognize that.
Oh yeah.
Man, I can say the same thing here. If it wasn't John, BJJ Fanatics wouldn't do the same thing as well. So, how many lives and business and the martial arts he touched, and no, you're very grateful to work with him. No, but anyways, no, that's amazing. So, guys, this is the first instructional video that Brian Glick is ever filming. And as you guys saw, it's going to be all about the clamp under pressure series that he's filming. And I'm very excited. It was super interesting to learn. And I think, like, especially the small guys, I think they will eat this, you know. Like so thanks so much, Brian.
Well, thank you so much. Such a pleasure.
Thank you. And guys, it's going to be at BJJFanatics.com very soon. Maybe by the time you're watching, it's already there. So make sure to check that out. And thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bernardo.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Please help me out to grow my YouTube channel. Just click subscribe. And to watch more videos, just click under see more videos. I hope you enjoyed.
BJJFanatics.com. Use the promo code YouTubeFaria to get 10% off any instructional video. Improve your jiu-jitsu faster.